On January 20th, 2015, the school district hosted a town hall meeting at the Elizabeth High School. Approximately 60 members of the district and staff attended. The purpose of the town hall was to provide background on the district's financial status and hear ideas and suggestions from the community regarding the district's financial challenges. The agenda, shown here, was brief, with the bulk of the time devoted to public input. This short video covers the information provided to attendees of the event. A record of the input received from the community is available on the district website. As stated in the introduction, the primary purpose of the 2-hour session was to listen to community ideas and suggestions as we address the ongoing fiscal constraints on our schools. Before we dove into that, it was important to frame the discussion, to ensure everyone was on the same sheet of music, so to speak, regarding our level of funding, the constraints we face, and the competing demands we face as we work to provide the best education possible for the students of our district. After all, how well we prepare our kids for college or the workforce is the most important measure of our success. By this measure, we're doing quite well as a district. We are accredited by the state at the second highest of 5 levels given. Our 4-year graduation rate is nearly 12% higher than the state average of 76%. Elizabeth High School ACT scores, the widely used test for college entrance, are higher than the 5 nearest surrounding high schools. Our graduates have gone on to study at some of the most competitive universities in the nation. In just the past few years, these include the Colorado School of Mines, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and the U.S. Air Force Academy. These great results don't just magically happen in high school, though. We provide our over 2,600 students a wide range of learning opportunities, beginning with preschool programs at our 2 elementary schools. The Legacy Academy Charter School provides parental choice from kindergarten through 8th grade. Our middle school not only provides a tremendous array of elective courses, it also has a very competitive sports program. This program prepares our students for participation in our state award-winning high school athletics program. For those who do not thrive in the traditional high school setting, our alternative high school, Frontier, provides a tremendous option and notably is one of the top 10 alternative campuses in the state. We pride ourselves in offering big district opportunities in a small town school setting. We strive to provide individualized instruction to each of our students, so each has the maximum opportunity to meet their potential. That even as resources have declined, our district has done its best to serve our students well. Though we always strive to improve, it's becoming harder and harder to maintain the status quo, and we want to ensure we preserve what is most important to our community. Our requirements have outpaced our resources. This has required extensive use of our limited reserves. So why is it becoming harder to maintain the quality of education we have established as the norm in our district? There are 2 primary reasons, both outside of direct district control. The first is an explosion of education reforms from both the federal and state levels, which have greatly expanded the administrative requirements placed on our staff, both at the district level and in the classrooms. These unfunded mandates, such as adapting curriculum in support of Common Core, developing and implementing new teacher evaluation systems, increased reporting on student growth and performance, carrying out new state and multi-state standardized testing such as PARCC, all of these consume thousands of man-hours each school year, hours that are focused on compliance versus focused on students. This is the antithesis of local control, and it raises valid concerns about national one-size-fits-all education versus education based on individual community, local values. Secondly, not only are we doing more, we're doing it with less. We are making do with less because the state is not providing the level of funding mandated by Amendment 23 of our state constitution. This amendment requires the state to increase per pupil funding for K-12 at a rate equal to inflation. For the last 5 years, this has not happened, and the cost to our district is now nearly $13 million through this school year. Unfortunately, the budget the governor proposed for the next year will see another $1.95 million reduction from the amount called for in our Constitution. These reductions are known collectively as the negative factor. Over the past 5 years, we have faced a shortfall of approximately $2.6 million annually. We have found efficiencies, cutting personnel spending, delaying maintenance on our buildings, and have continued to operate aging computers and buses. This has saved about $2 million each year. To cover the remaining deficit, we have pulled from our carefully built reserves. More specifically, in the area of personnel spending, we have cut 11% of our employees overall, with a 25% cut of administrators. Pay increases have not kept up with the nearby larger districts, and our teacher turnover rate increased to 30%, twice the state average. Infrastructure spending has been reduced by several $100,000 each year. State evaluations released in 2012 identified some $43 million in necessary repairs and facility investment required to address all needs. Local citizens committees' evaluations completed in 2013 prioritized several $1 million worth of critical and urgent capital needs. So how do we address all this with annual operating revenues of approximately $17 million, about the same level we had in 2008? With only about $2.5 million left in our reserves, the answer is simple. We don't. We can't do it all. Trade-offs are required, and we discussed these prior to hearing from the audience. More funding is not the immediate answer. Our funding level is set through a 1994 state-level funding formula that establishes the amount a district is due built on a base per pupil amount multiplied by student headcount and then augmented by several strictly defined demographic factors. For the last 5 years, this amount has been reduced by the negative factor we just discussed, and this determines the final number each school district receives. The revenues that are applied to this number are comprised of local and state money. First, home and business property taxes, which are limited by the Gallagher Amendment, and special use fees, vehicle registration, developers' fees, are applied at the local level, and then the state equalization funding makes up any shortfall. Under this formula, few districts funded their schools entirely from local monies. Our district receives approximately 70% of its funding from the state. Most local districts in the state have additional revenues above the amount set by the formula. This money comes from approved mill levy overrides by local voters. By law, an override can provide up to 25% more funding than the 1994 formula. TABOR, or the Taxpayer Bill of Rights, requires voter approval for all tax increases. We do not have a mill levy override. This was asked for in ballot question 3A, which did not pass this past November. Though its influence may be great, the federal government provides a relatively small amount of funding through the school lunch program and Title I. This is only about 3.5% of our overall revenue. Borrowing for capital projects such as building schools, major repairs, and purchase of capital assets is generally funded through bonds. We have approximately $8.5 million left on the bonds that were sold to finance the building of Elizabeth High School, and this represents our only debt. Sale of bonds and collection of taxes to pay investors also requires voter approval under TABOR. Ballot question 3B asked voters to approve an additional $2.5 million of borrowing to address several critical and urgent projects last November. This measure also failed. So, for the time being, the only funding our district receives is that provided by the state funding formula and a small amount of federal funding. When all sources are taken into account, we remain at the very bottom of the list of districts in terms of per pupil funding. In November 2014, voters were asked to approve additional tax levies, this was question 3A, and additional borrowing, this was question 3B, that would partially replace an ongoing shortfall in state-level funding. Approximately 7,800 votes were cast on each of these two questions. This is about 70% of the number of registered voters in our district. The first question, ballot question 3A, asked for approval to provide an additional $1 million annually to allow the district to recruit and retain talented teachers, provide funding to strengthen security in our schools, and to modernize aging information technology in our classrooms. This increase would have been authorized for a period limited to 5 years to prove its effectiveness, and could not have been extended without further voter approval. The effective passage on the average homeowner would have been approximately $180 per year. Unfortunately, this measure failed 54% to 46%. The second question, ballot issue 3B, asked for approval to borrow $2.5 million in order to address a limited list of urgent and critical capital maintenance and safety issues in our schools. The two most expensive items on this list were the replacement of roofs on the Elizabeth High School and Singing Hills Elementary. The remainder of the list improved emergency communications and response throughout the district and would have replaced a number of aging buses. The money borrowed would have been paid off at an interest rate that would not have exceeded 3% over a period of 7 years, with no increase over current tax collections. Though this measure failed too, at 52% to 48%, it reflects almost a 10% gain in support when compared to the results of a similar question asked in 2013. After the election, we surveyed employees and parents of students within the district to get some insight into why the majority of those that did vote did not support the measures. From this group, we received 98 responses. When asked for responses from the voting public at large, we received 187 more responses. Most, if not all, respondents provided comments, and we are still reviewing them to gain as much information as possible from this effort. But as an overview, here is what we've learned. Of those that responded, 199 voted for the measures and 45 against. This is interesting in that it seems to indicate that those of you who voted yes remain more invested in these issues than those who voted no. As you can see, 41 did not vote. This represents primarily those who work but don't live in the district, or are parents who aren't registered to vote here. In some cases, their students come from outside the district. Also interesting is the perception of having enough information before casting their vote. Overwhelmingly, those that voted, whether they were for or against, felt they had enough information to make a decision. So it's clear that based on the same facts, we can draw different conclusions as a community. We asked several open-ended questions. Why did you vote as you did? The answer to this can be generalized to the respondents' perception of the financial needs of the district. They voted yes if they believed we needed more funding, and voted no if they felt we had enough to meet our needs. We asked people what they had heard from others in the community that may have voted no. Again, there were many common themes. Many voted no just because these were questions about taxes. Many generalized these as questions about government spending increases versus placing additional value on quality education or spending for local priorities. And there were several that expressed concerns over past mismanagement or thefts, perceived current waste, and or felt that the questions were written too broadly. We also asked for suggestions to address issues since additional local funding would not be available. These answers range from very broad to some very specific ideas. Most, however, focus on finding additional savings, cutting services, programs, or people, and making additional efforts to find additional sources of funds. We will continue to work through these results and input from sessions like the town hall that was held as we work to address the district's needs. So, based on these election results and the budget submitted by the governor for next year's funding, we can expect no relief in terms of additional funding. So, we find ourselves with a problem. Our requirements far exceed our levels of resource. This is a situation no different than families and businesses face every day in this community. We will address this problem in the same way. We will reduce costs as much as we can by finding cheaper alternatives, eliminate costs that are not necessary, and prioritize our spending and look for ways to bring in more money. How we go about this in our school district is a bit different than how we all do this for our own family budget, because the board serves the community, and our community is diverse. What one person thinks is necessary, others do not. Some people place great value on some aspects of the services we provide, and others feel those services may have a very low priority. We have to meet the needs of every student in every classroom on every day, while ensuring we can serve the needs of students in coming years as well. We provide a service, education, and this is a very people-centered business. But our taxpayers, the shareholders, the patrons of our district, have invested millions in our facilities. Our district has grown from a single school that served the community from 1920 until 1978, and now we support education in 6 different schools. We have a responsibility to preserve the value of this investment while simultaneously preparing our students for college or career. So, as our superintendent facilitated the input tonight, we ask that everyone keep in mind the financial balancing act that we face. We asked for their ideas for balancing the needs of people versus the needs of stuff. We asked for their suggestions regarding how to balance current operational needs versus known future requirements. And as one final thought, we asked that as they focused on what we want to fix as a community, that they remain aware of the most positive aspects of the schools that we need to preserve. At this point in the session, our superintendent facilitated 90 minutes of public input based around 3 very simple questions. The ideas and suggestions provided by the community members present were recorded and are available on the district website. Question 1. From your perspective, what are the top budget issues and financial challenges facing the district now and into the future? Question 2. Do you believe local voters should be asked again for additional school funding, and why? And finally, question 3 was a fairly broad question. What are your ideas and suggestions to address the school district's financial situation? The ideas and suggestions that we gathered during the public input session of the Town Hall are extremely valuable to the board as we work through the tough issues that we face as a community. Over the next few months, we will be working several paths in parallel. We will refine our priorities for funding for next year. We will work the legislature hard, the education committees in particular, as we are blessed to have local legislators that truly understand our needs. Representative Dorr and Senator Sonnenberg both understand the unique needs of our district very well. And though we can't sit and hope, we will carefully monitor the lawsuit brought by the Rural Alliance of School Boards that is seeking to enforce Amendment 23. As the legislature does its work, we will get a clearer idea of next year's funding level, and will produce a draft budget for public comment in May, and the board will approve next year's budget in June. Thank you for taking the time to view this short video. If you have ideas or suggestions regarding financing of the district, please contact a board member or email us at townhall@esdk12.org.